Let's talk about self-love versus our addictions, our negative habits, negative behaviors, and how those two things are linked in real life. This is a very unique topic because we are all aware of this whole idea of self-care, self-love, doing something for ourselves, healing, leaving time for me time, right? That whole category is there. And then on this side, we have our destructive habits. We have habits that are ruining our lives slowly and surely, but they're not killing you. So we're not super focused on them on a daily basis. And these guys include things like cigarettes, excessive alcohol use on a daily basis, but not to a point where you are completely losing your life, pornography and everything else. Now, how are these two things linked? When we seek these things, when we seek these destructive habits, we justify it through self-love, right? We get to that extra drink at the end of the busy day of work, and we've already been drinking five nights in a row, and we think of it as it's just going to make me feel, it's just going to take the edge off, make me feel a little bit light, a little bit better at the end of the night. Same with junk food. You know, if we're eating ice cream and we've had a long stressful couple of days. Same with pornography and everything else. So we take the justification of self-love, the concept of self-love, the idea that we need to do something for ourselves as a form of self-care, as a routine to bring ourselves back to the present, to a neutral state, relieving the stress, relieving the all the anxiety, the negativity that builds up throughout the day in our daily lives. We take that justification and we apply it to these self-destructive habits. Now, the opposite of that thought, hold the first thought, the opposite of that thought is that these destructive habits are destructive. These destructive habits are ruining our lives. These destructive habits are helping us in short term, but they're not really saving us in the long term. They're not really adding days to your life, adding hours and minutes to your life. They're not really adding quality of experience to the long term of your life, right? But they're making you feel better tonight because you had a long week. They're making you feel better tonight because you are keeping a job that you shouldn't be in, and you've been annoyed at your boss for the past 2 months, right? They're keeping you high. They're keeping you on a steady high just so you can continue on this never-ending rat race. So letting go of these habits is more than that, really, right? Because it turns into letting go. Well, it turns into the recognition of what this life is about, the reality of what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. What aspects of our lives do we actually love and enjoy and adore and want to keep? And then what aspects are just not, they're not working. We're not resonating with them. We're at complete different frequencies. And in order to manage that baggage that we should have gotten rid of a long time ago, and now we're adding this whole other baggage of self-destructive habits to be able to maintain a life that we shouldn't have had to begin with. So letting go of these habits and understanding that this is not necessarily a source of self-love. Just because you're doing this, just because you're feeling better tonight, you feel great, you feel a little bit high, a little bit stoned, a little bit drunk, this is not necessarily helping your weekly, monthly goals, your annual plans, and the person that you're meant to become, and the person you're meant to grow into as you age, and the examples you should be setting for the next generations, your kids and the people around you, relationships around you, right? So letting go of these things and understanding that this is not self-love, right? Self-love is the ability to love yourself through failures, despite all the odds and all the weaknesses and negativities and disadvantages that are around you, and despite all the comments, all the judgments, all the opinions of the people around. That is the way we should be defining self-love, right? And it's a form of authenticity. It's an aspect, it's a chapter of what it means to be you. And that is a whole different ballpark of its own, because we can talk about authenticity for the rest of our lives and what that means, and that's a complicated journey, because most of us don't know what authenticity even means, because we've been conditioned to have certain desires and certain needs and certain wants and health insurance and at the age of 19, when you're probably the healthiest you'll ever be. We've been conditioned to have these desires and authentic needs and wants, but the truth is that not all of them are actually yours, right? And to find your own authenticity, you really have to sit alone with yourself for a long time. You really have to spend a whole lot of time in solitude and think and allow your brain to go far deeper, journal and write about what aspects of your life are you proud of, do you want more of, and write about what aspects of your life they're just not really, you feel numb about, right? So authenticity is a very complicated journey, and I believe it's a journey that we all get to explore in a never-ending way as we age. It never really stops for us, right? Because we have the ability to constantly find new love, new passions, new desires. And we also, because of that, we also have the ability to question that love, that passion, desire, and to know how authentic it is. And if it is authentic, it opens such wonderful doors of exploration for us. But back to this destructive habit situation, which then we manipulate ourselves, we lie to ourselves by justifying it as a form of self-love and self-care. This is something that I constantly talk about, but the recognition of the lie that we get to live within these habits is a huge aspect of it. But the other side, which is what self-love actually is versus how we define it to ourselves in order to justify our negative behaviors, is a huge realm of realization for most of you, for me, and for everybody else, right? That self-love could be alone time on a Saturday night. Self-love could be being sober for a month long, for 2 months long. And notice that when we talk about sobriety, we're not discussing a lifelong journey, because it just puts way too much pressure on us. We don't need to add more pressure. Life is already hard as it is. You don't need to make it harder for yourself, right? Life is already complicated as it is. You don't need to make it more complicated. Our goal is to simplify. And that's really the way we should be learning anything in life, and we should make progress in anything in life. Simplification leads to results. Now, the results will take a while, but because we're simplifying, we're only expecting small incremental progress. So the question really at the end of this video is, how are your self-destructive behaviors actually a form of self-love? And if the truth, the most honestful answer you can give is yes, then excellent. Continue on the journey. But if you don't find that level of true self-love, self-care in that extra can of beer on the porn website on a Friday night, or whatever your definition of junk food or whatever else your definition of self-harming yourself a little bit is, then there is an opportunity for you to look within and ask yourself, what really is self-love defined for you, and how can you use that to create a better version of yourself? That could be stepping into nature, going on a hike. That could be going into the ocean. That could be drinking a cup of coffee and giving yourself an hour to enjoy it outdoors next to a bunch of flowers and under the shade and on a beautiful day, and reading a book in the meantime, right? There's so many different ways that we can redefine self-love, and that redefinition is the bridge between destructive behaviors that have been manipulated in our mind to be called a form of care and form of love and form of need for us, versus healthier choices, right? Versus any other source of a pattern that could actually open a more long-term growth. And notice that we are so afraid of long-term growth. Long-term growth means you might have to get rid of that job. You might have to get rid of that girlfriend. You might have to say goodbye to your friends. You might have to move to a different city. Long-term growth is scary, man. Long-term growth is something we all run away from. And so it's so much easier to reach back to, arrive back into that self-destructive addiction in order to maintain this life untouched, maintain this life as is. Because God forbid if we actually quit the job and start a new journey, go on an adventure, we are afraid of that. We're afraid of change. So change is somewhere in the middle, self-love on this side, and our addictions and destructive patterns on the other. And just think about this triangle as it's created.